Good afternoon. My name is Claire Saxton with the Cancer Support Community. Welcome to our webinar, Frankly Speaking About Cancer, Clinical Trials and Immunotherapy, hosted by the Cancer Support Community. If you need technical assistance during the webinar, please dial 1-866-229-3239 and push option 1. Before we start, I'll go over some reminders and housekeeping items. If you would like to listen to today's presentation via telephone, please dial in using the conference line code you see on the screen now. Today's call is being recorded and will be available on our website at www.cancersupportcommunity.org/webinars within the week. The format of today's webinar will be as follows. The panelists will begin the discussion first, and then we will open up the discussion to the audience during the question and answer session. Thank you to those who submitted questions prior to the webinar as part of the registration form. If you would like to ask additional questions, please feel free to type it into the Q&A box on the right of your screen. You may submit a question at any time during the event. At the end of this webinar, you will be automatically redirected to the post-webinar survey. Please take a few minutes to complete this survey as your input is of great value to us. I would now like to introduce the Cancer Support Community, which is the largest professionally led nonprofit network of cancer support worldwide. CSC is dedicated to ensuring that all people impacted by cancer are empowered by knowledge, strengthened by action, and sustained by community. We offer the highest quality social and emotional support through our affiliate network, as well as online or over the phone. On this next screen, you'll see some of the resources we provide at the Cancer Support Community. The first one there is the Cancer Support Helpline, which is staffed by licensed professional counselors who are available to assist you Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We also have our Open to Options program, which is a research-proven program that can help you prepare a list of questions to share with your doctor. And our Frankly Speaking About Cancer program is CSC's landmark education series, which provides trusted information on a variety of topics important to people affected by cancer. I would also like to introduce our Cancer Experience Registry, which is a unique project for people affected by cancer. People who have been diagnosed with cancer and those who help care for them can join the registry. You can begin by answering survey questions. Your answers and those of others describe the experience of cancer patients and caregivers. This information is used to provide education and support resources that speak to patients, caregivers, and their needs. For more information or to join, visit www.cancerexperienceregistry.org. I would also like to take a moment to talk about our Grassroots movement, which helps ensure that people touched by cancer have access to quality, comprehensive cancer care that includes social and emotional support. Again, if you would like to learn more about this program or to sign up, visit our main website at www.cancersupportcommunity.org. I would now like to take a moment to introduce our panelists, Dr. Giaccone and Shannon Semple. Dr. Giaccone led an immunotherapy clinical trial that Shannon was a part of. Giaccone, MD, PhD, is an internationally recognized expert in the field of lung cancer and developmental therapeutics. Dr. Giaccone was appointed Chief of the Medical Oncology Branch of the Center for Cancer Research of the National Cancer Institute in April 2007. In his time at NCI, he helped restructure the intramural medical oncology and clinical trial organization. In January 2013, he joined the Lombardi Comprehensive Cancer Center at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. as the Associate Director for Clinical Research and the Director of Clinical Research for the MedStar Health Center Network's Washington region. Shannon Semple was a healthy triathlete who hails from New York. After becoming a physician's assistant, she and her husband moved to New Bern, North Carolina. In 2013, she was diagnosed with advanced cancer of the thymus. The thymus is a small gland in the neck that produces T cells for the immune system. After chemotherapy failed her and radiation treatments, she was left feeling hopeless. She was referred to an immunotherapy clinical trial at the Georgetown Lombardi Comprehensive Cancer Center by her oncologist. She feels that because of that trial, her life was saved. I'm now going to ask Dr. Giaccone to talk to us about immunotherapy and Shannon's particular case and this trial.
And then I'll be talking about clinical trials, not only about immunotherapy, but in general clinical trials. I've been involved in clinical trials and research in cancer for a very long time, especially in the field of chest diseases, chest tumors. So lung cancer is, of course, very common, but then also more rare tumor types like thymomas and thymicarcinoma. And the reason why we are doing this webinar today with Shannon is the phase 2 study that is still ongoing with Keytruda or pembrolizumab in patients with thymic carcinoma. On the next slide, you can see what immunotherapy, the definition of immunotherapy and immuno-oncology. Essentially, immuno-oncology is not a new field of research and in clinical oncology. It has been around for at least 40 years, and but only very recently we have finally some positive results. And really, what immunotherapy means is essentially using the immune system that everybody has, that is often, when you have a cancer, is repressed by the tumor. And what happens is that you can, in fact, stimulate the immune system, your own immune system, to fight the cancer. Instead of using drugs like, chemotherapy that will directly attack the cancer. So, in a sense, this is a more physiological way of treating tumors than chemotherapy, and potentially also has much less side effects. So then if you go to the next slide, this is a broader definition of the immunotherapy. So we know that the immune system of everybody can attack cancer cells, and this can be done effectively when tumors are very small. But of course, when tumors are large, then it may be much more difficult. Why has it taken so long to make immunotherapy work? Essentially, I think we did not have sufficient understanding of how tumors work. Especially, we do not know that tumors can produce substances, proteins that can block the immune system. It is, in fact, only in the last 10 to 15 years that we discovered particular molecules like CTLA-4 and PD-1 and PD-L1 that are important molecules that block the immune system from fighting the cancer. So now, if you can block these blockers, you can unleash the immune system against the cancer. And so that is what has brought about the new successes of immunotherapy that I'll be talking about shortly. So on the next slide, I'll be talking a bit more about the thymus, because this is what the webinar with Shannon is. This is a rare form of cancer that arises from the thymus gland. Thymus gland is important for the immune system. In fact, that's where the immune system is formed. Most of the lymphocytes and white blood cells are formed there, and this is very important for the formation of the immune system and all the cells that populate the immune system. And why would this cancer be particularly susceptible to a treatment with immunotherapy? Well, we know that this cancer is high in expression of PD-L1, which is one of these blocking molecules that we know block the immune system. So this was essentially the reason to start a study with one of these new molecules that can fight the cancer. So in the next slide, you can see why we think now that some tumors are more immunogenic than others. Essentially, we have known for a very long time that a couple of tumors, and namely melanoma and kidney cancer, are highly immunogenic. And we knew this because some of these tumors actually can fight themselves in the body. So some of these tumors can regress spontaneously without even doing any treatment. So we knew that there was something regulating the tumor burden and progression in these tumors, and that was probably related to immunity. And in fact, most of the immunotherapy trials that have been done in the past were really targeting patients with melanoma and kidney cancer. And what we have known until now is that some of the tumors like lung cancer, bladder cancer, head and neck cancer are much less immunogenic. But now that we understand a little bit better how tumors are really regulated, how the immune system can be blocked against these tumors, we start realizing that there are other factors that can, in fact, be very important in the activity of immunotherapy against these tumors. And some of these I already alluded to. The presence of PD-L1 is one of them, so one of these blocking molecules on the tumor cells. And the other one is the high number of mutations that these tumors have. Essentially, if you have a tumor that has a lot of genetic abnormalities, a lot of DNA errors, then these tumors are more prone to create neoantigens, meaning to create a situation where the immune system can react. So tumors that are very rich in these neoantigens are in general thought to be more immunogenic. I don't think that this is the complete answer to the question we have about immunotherapy and its effectiveness, but at least it's a good start. So now let's go and talk about clinical trials. So a clinical trial is essentially how clinical research is done. We need to test new treatments and new strategies on patients, and by necessity, we need to start when we don't have much information about this new treatment or strategy. So we really need to select the patient and monitor the patients very carefully, especially when things are very new. And there are several phases, as you can see on the next slide, several phases of these clinical trials. We start with phase 1 trials where the drug, for instance, a new drug, is not known, so we need to, first of all, look at the safety. How much can we give of the drug without too much toxicity? Once we've done that and established a safe dose, then we go into phase 2 trials where we use this dose to treat specific tumors or specific diseases if it is not a tumor. And once we've done that and we have seen enough efficacy, then there will be phase 3 trials. These are much larger trials that compare this new treatment or strategy to what was available until then as best strategy or treatment. So these are phase 3 trials, and these are almost always necessary, especially for very common diseases or tumors. Now, on the next slide, what I can tell you is that immunotherapy has been evolving very rapidly, and in fact, now we have several of these PD-1 and PD-L1 antibodies that have been approved by FDA for the treatment of lung cancer, melanoma, bladder cancer, head and neck cancer, and many others are to come. We know that there is activity also in other tumor types, and probably FDA will give the approval of these drugs and many others in the coming months. So that's all what I have to say about immunotherapy and cancer.
So, Dr. Giuseppe, what were you able to offer Shannon when she came to see you for the clinical trial?
Yeah, so in March last year, we started a phase 2 trial with pembrolizumab, which is one of these PD-1 antibodies. And she was a good candidate because she had thymic carcinoma. The study was only for thymic carcinoma patients. And she was in good condition when she came. And the situation was that of an advanced cancer. So that's how you do phase 2 trials. Most of the times you use patients that have advanced cancer, and you try to establish the activity of these new treatments.
So Shannon is now going to share her perceptions of what her experience was like doing the immunotherapy clinical trial.
Thank you, Claire. And first, let me say thank you so much for letting me participate in this. And also thank you to Dr. Giaccone, who really had the determination to bring this drug to folks like me with rare cancer. Certainly turned things around for me. If I could have that first slide. So back, I have to go back to 2011, really. At that time, I was very healthy, on a rigorous training schedule for half Ironman races, and really feeling terrific. And in 2012, my husband and I decided that we'd take a brief break from all of that and hike the Grand Canyon. So we hiked rim to rim, and climbing out of the canyon on like day 4, I noticed I was extremely short of breath, and that seemed very unusual for me. Mostly because I had such a rigorous training schedule prior to that. So it piqued my interest, but I think, as a lot of people do, I was maybe in a little bit of denial and just attributed to getting a little older and that type of thing. So I didn't really pursue any further investigation on that. And I remember that summer of 2012, I was working as a physician assistant in a general surgery practice. I was very busy at work, but I was extraordinarily fatigued. And again, that was another thing. I just thought, I'm working long hours and I'm just kind of out of shape. And by fall of 2012, I actually wound up in the hospital with what we thought was a tick-borne illness. And as it turned out, and looking back retrospectively, can say that was probably the earliest manifestations of the disease. I wasn't actually diagnosed until April of 2013, and at that point it had already reached stage 4. So I had bone metastases at that point, and you can imagine that was a pretty devastating bit of news to receive, because most folks, or a lot of folks, receive that information, when they're stage 1, stage 2, that type of thing. But I was sort of beyond all of that, and the first oncologist I went to see basically told me to get my bucket list ready. So that was pretty hard to hear. If I could get the next slide. So before you can start many of these trials, there's certain things that you have to go through, and one of them is, in this case, for my type of cancer, I had to have a platinum-based chemotherapy. And that's the standard of care at this point. So that was the first thing I did in early May of 2013, underwent 4 courses of Taxotere and cisplatin. And I got a very short-lived response, probably a couple of months, and wound up having to have multiple radiation treatments. And we realized we weren't really getting very far. And I think, being in the medical community and probably just being a curious person by nature, I had already started to research what other options were out there. Unfortunately, for my cancer, there weren't a lot of options, and that was pretty devastating. So I urged my oncologist at the time to set me up for genomic testing. And this is one of those points that I think is really important for anybody that would consider doing a clinical trial. Genomic testing basically looks at the genetic makeup of the mutations in your tumor. Unfortunately, at this time, and to my knowledge, it is not covered by insurance, but it was the best $4,000 I ever spent, because what it does is it really helps the docs to determine which direction you can go, what clinical trial you might qualify based on the mutations of that particular tumor. So that helped me a lot, and that sent me off to my very first clinical trial, which was up at Sloan Kettering in New York. That was a targeted therapy trial, and unfortunately, we know those targeted therapies work, but within 8 to 12 months, most people become somewhat immune to them. And I was, unfortunately, starting to experience a lot more in the way of bone metastases. So in late 2014, I came off of that drug and was really on nothing. But my oncologist up there in New York had heard about Dr. Giaccone's pending trial. It wasn't even on the books yet, really, but he had heard about it, and I'd been pestering him about immunotherapy, thinking that could potentially be a great thing for me. So we got that all set up, and I was fortunate enough to meet with Dr. Giaccone, and really before the trial started, and he gave me a lot of hope. He sat down with me, and at a point where I was pretty sure that things were not going well, he really kind of pulled me out of a dark place, and not long after that, we started the infusion. And I was very, very blessed with an amazing response. So about 3 weeks after the first infusion, we were able to tell right away that we were getting some kind of response, because I had a lymph node in my neck, and we noticed that actually had shrunk. So it was really good news and really exciting. And one of the things that I think is fairly true, and maybe Dr. Giaccone can comment on this, but it either works for you or it doesn't. I mean, there are partial responses, but I think they pretty much know right away whether you're going to have a good response to this or not. Let's go to the next slide. Beppy, is that a fair thing to say? No, he's off.
I think I will discuss about this a little later, but
okay.
So there are patients who respond and patients who don't. Always the case.
Great. So when I first met Dr. Giaccone, he was very clear about participating in the trial. He made it he was very direct. He did not give me any false hope, which I think is very important. There were patients that respond, there are patients that don't respond, and there is no way to really predict who will be the one that responds. The thing I liked about this particular trial is that the drug was already known. There was no placebo. It was not a blinded trial, so I kind of knew what I was getting into. And he, as I may have mentioned, he was very careful to point out that this drug could work for me, it might not. I think most important is that he explained all of the potential side effects, and they were from the very basic, very mildest thing that could happen, which was sort of flu-like symptoms, which I did actually experience after my first infusion, but never had it again. But he also mentioned, some pretty life-threatening things that could happen too. So, you have to sort of weigh the risks and the benefits to you personally, and I think that's really the key. And for me, certainly having really no other options, this seemed like the right way to go. It seemed like the benefits to me, or the potential benefits, outweighed the risks. Next slide. So as I mentioned, I did experience flu-like symptoms after the first infusion, and it was so mild. It was managed with Tylenol, and it was gone in a couple of days. And each subsequent infusion, I really didn't have anything like that. I was on the trial drug for 15 months, and it was about at that point that I started to experience a mild elevation in my liver enzymes. And with the clinical trials, there's everything is very clearly dictated by the protocol. So as in accordance with the protocol, I came off the study drug and was started on prednisone. And I've been taking that since about July, actually August. And liver enzymes have just returned to normal. So it's frustrating to stop that drug, but I had a good long while on it, and I'm very fortunate that I have no detectable disease at this time. So if you got to stop, that's probably a good stopping point. Next slide.
So Dr. Giaccone, if you could now comment a little bit on Shannon's own case in your clinical trial.
Yeah, so I think Shannon was one of the first patients that had a dramatic response to this treatment. And I call it dramatic because I had never seen anything like this on PET scan in particular. PET scan gives you the activity of the tumor. And at the beginning, there was a lot of activity everywhere in the bones and other organs. And then a PET scan done a few months later was essentially negative. There was nothing to be seen. We could still see something in the liver, very, very small in the CT scan, but the radiologist wasn't sure if there was anything at all. And so that was what the situation is at this moment. So I think that Shannon is right. There's no detectable disease. Would see the scans at this time, you would say, well, there's nothing there, nothing to be worried about. Of course, we don't know the future, but again, I repeat it, I've never seen responses that are so profound and so durable in this disease. And this is not the only disease where immunotherapy is really making a huge impact. So, coming back to the fact that each patient is different, and we know that, so each tumor is different, and not all patients respond to these treatments. And in fact, if you have no ways of selecting patients like we had at the beginning of this study, only about 20 to 25% of the patients will have a major response, like the one that Shannon had. Most of these responses, though, are very durable, unlike what you see with targeted therapy, as Shannon was mentioning, or with chemotherapy. And in general, the side effects are much better tolerated. So if you don't have a way of selecting patients, you can expect 20 to 25% chance of having good results with these treatments. But there are studies now going on trying to identify the patients. As I mentioned to you before, PD-L1 expression is one way of selecting the patients. And the mutation burden, how many mutations the tumor has, is potentially another way of doing that. If you can move to the next slide. Still, with any treatment, also with immunotherapy, my major concern is that not all patients respond. Still do not understand why this is not for everybody, but we know that for sure, even if we select in the best possible way the patients to be treated with these therapies, only about 50% of the patients will have a major response for what we can do now, which is of course much better than it was a couple of years ago. And we are learning this really through clinical trials. So I think the clinical trials are essential for moving forward a new treatment to an approved treatment. And these clinical trials have to be done very carefully. Clinical trials are really at the core of advancement of medicine in general, and in particular oncology. Clinical trials are expensive, and of course they subject patients to more investigation than you would normally do outside the clinical trials, but are really an essential part of what we need to do to move things forward. And if you go to the next slide, what would you tell somebody who's thinking about participating in immunotherapy clinical trials? I think that it's very important that patients get all the information that there is about what can be expected in terms of results, positive results, benefits, but also the potential risks. Immunotherapy, as I said before, at least this type of immunotherapy that we are using now, has very few side effects, but some of these side effects can be very severe. And one has to know this, first of all, because being informed is the best way of preventing major issues. If you know that this can happen, even if it is very rare, you can in fact start treatment against these side effects very early and just prevent major damage. What are my plans for future trials? Well, there is a lot of immunotherapy trials that are presently ongoing, especially in lung cancer, and for thymic carcinoma, for which there are not so many clinical trials. We plan on building on the result that we had so far with pembrolizumab and combining it with other therapeutic options, potentially targeted therapies or maybe even chemotherapy and radiation. So on the next slide, if you want to have more information about clinical trials, these are the most important websites on which you can get information on these, and you can just click on this and type in what type of tumor you're interested in, and then you can also find information about the doctors who are running the clinical studies.
So Shannon, do you have any last thoughts here?
Well, certainly, when I was thinking about this presentation, and what I would say to somebody who was thinking about a clinical trial or a clinical trial with immunotherapy, of course, my first reaction was, yes, just do it, especially if you have few options. But, after further thought, I realized that, it's actually a very personal decision, and I would certainly concur with Dr. Giaccone that, you have to know what you're getting yourself into. You have to be well informed. In my case, I felt I was well informed. I had been researching immunotherapy prior to starting the trial, and I felt like it was a really good shot for me, not really knowing fully the mechanics of it, but just the concept of it is what I really like, that you utilize your own immune system to fight cancer. So I also felt that the big thing is you're also helping other people. I mean, I certainly stood to gain a lot personally, and fortunately I have, but you're also helping other people either presently or down the line. All the information that is gathered by the researchers and doctors like Dr. Giaccone, that is all information that will be used in some way to hopefully improve on our current therapies. And so that was very appealing to me, certainly as a healthcare provider, and secondly, just as a human. It just made me feel good to think that, even if it didn't work for me, there'd be a reason why, and that could potentially help make some changes. So, there's not too many people out there that don't know people who've been touched by cancer, and so I think that the more information out there, the better off we really are. And you got to do the research, you've got to do your due diligence, and it's your life, and you got to get out there and look and see what's available. If nothing changes, nothing changes. So you got to make the change, and that's really what happened. Is I just kept looking and looking for new things, and fortunately, my guy up in my old oncologist in New York knew of Dr. Giaccone's study, and I was very fortunate to get in and thrilled to participate.
We would now like to open the discussion up to the audience. We may have answered some of your questions during the presentation. However, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to type them into the Q&A box that you see on the right of your screen. So our first question is for Dr. Giaccone. You said that this kind of immunotherapy was targeted at PD-1 or PD-L1. Are there other different kinds of immunotherapy trials out there?
Oh, yes. There's lots of other potential active immunotherapies out there. And, one immunotherapy was approved a couple of years ago. It's called Provenge for prostate cancer. That was actually the first one. But right now, the field is moving into the area of molecules that block the immune system, just like PD-1 and PD-L1. So there are a lot of these molecules that are now recognized, and there are now antibodies against these molecules. And the field is moving in the direction of combining these antibodies, PD-1 and PD-L1 antibodies, with these other molecules, inhibitors of the inhibitors, trying to stimulate the immune system even further, and potentially also reducing side effects. So yes, there's a lot of clinical trials that are ongoing now. Many of these are combinations of several immunotherapies, but others are combination of immunotherapy with chemotherapy, with radiation, you name it. It's really an explosion of interest, and the fact is that these things are really starting making a difference. We start thinking that maybe we can cure some patients that come with advanced cancer. We can cure some of these patients. So it is really exciting.
To follow up with the previous question, do you recommend that this immunotherapy be taken with hormone therapy or other therapies?
I think it's a bit early to say that. All of these immunotherapies, and we're talking about mainly PD-1 antibodies and PD-L1 antibodies, have been so far approved by themselves as single agents. So the activity of combinations is still under investigation, and I would not go against the dogma of running first a clinical study and then becoming standard. I must confess, I haven't seen results of these combinations that are much better than the single agent so far. But I think it's a bit too early, and potentially there are some of these combinations that might be synergistic. Talking about hormones, I don't think that is an area where we have so far enough experience, in particular in breast cancer. These antibodies, this type of immunotherapies, are not terribly effective in the majority of breast cancer patients. Are somewhat effective in some subsets of breast cancer patients that are called triple negative. In fact, patients that have no receptors for hormones or for HER2. So those are much more aggressive types of breast cancer, and those seem to be sensitive to immunotherapy, just like lung cancer and melanoma, for instance. So again, it comes down to selecting the patient, the genomics of their tumor, and then you can find subgroups of patients where these treatments can actually be quite effective.
One of our participants asked in particular about estrogen receptor positive breast cancer and less mutant types of breast cancer like lobular. It sounds like you answered that question already, but if you could just repeat that answer in terms of how has immunotherapy worked so far in those types of breast cancer that aren't triple negative?
Yeah, so it doesn't really work that well, at least as a single agent. So a way probably of stimulating the immune system a bit more in these particularly indolent types of breast cancer, those that have estrogen receptor positive tumors, and more indolent types like lobular carcinoma, probably combining these immunotherapies with other treatments could have a better effect. But the results so far are not as good as in triple-negative breast cancer, where really the research is now going very fast. There's been a study published just in a bit less than 30 patients showing a response rate which is very similar to lung cancer and melanoma in triple-negative breast cancer. So probably that would be the first group of patients with breast cancer where these drugs will be approved. And then research will have to be continued, and I think the combination strategies will be the way to go for the other types of breast cancer. And I think it's a bit too early to say that it's going to be very effective, though.
Thank you. So one of our participants was interested to know how the side effects of immunotherapy only have thus far compared with the side effects of chemotherapy.
Well, chemotherapy, as most of the people know, has a lot of side effects. That's also a reason why you cannot really give chemotherapy for a very prolonged time. Most of chemotherapy regimens are given for 4 to 6 cycles, so relatively short time. The reason being that then side effects, especially cumulative side effects, starts kicking in, and you cannot continue the chemotherapy at full dose for much longer. Immunotherapy is a different story. The number of side effects and also the seriousness of the side effects is much less than chemotherapy. In fact, immunotherapy, the major indications where these immunotherapies have been approved for are for treatments for 2 years. So that means that patients can in fact tolerate and go on for at least 2 years with these treatments. So overall, the frequency of side effects is much less. You probably have a few percentage of patients that would have to discontinue treatment because of side effects, and this is much higher with chemotherapy. You're talking about probably 30–40% of patients that receive chemotherapy that cannot tolerate treatment at full dose for more than 4 to 6 cycles. So these are really big differences. However, as we mentioned before, there are some specific side effects that immunotherapy has that have to do with autoimmune disorders. Essentially, the immune system with these monoclonal antibodies is stimulated to a point that it becomes overactive. So it is active also against normal cells. And so you have these autoimmune diseases that can be controlled, can be blocked, in fact, using steroids. But then at that point, probably you will block also the activity of the immunotherapy if there's still some activity. So there are very big differences, both in terms of percentage of patients that have side effects, severity of side effects. And the studies that have compared immunotherapy to chemotherapy have shown that immunotherapy is by far much better in terms of side effects. And the studies, at least in lung cancer, that have compared immunotherapy to chemotherapy in selected patients, meaning patients with tumors with high PD-L1 expression, have shown better results in terms of survival with immunotherapy than with chemotherapy. And in fact, for the first time in lung cancer, we will have probably FDA approving immunotherapy in first-line treatment for patients with advanced disease that will replace chemotherapy when the tumor has high expression of PD-L1. It is something that I would not have expected a few years ago, frankly.
Thank you. And so if someone doesn't have a tumor that has high expression of that immunotherapy blocking target, in this case PD-1 or PD-L1, does that mean that this therapy isn't for them?
This is a big controversial discussion. In fact, there are two monoclonal antibodies that are approved without any selection, and one is approved only with the selection of PD-L1 expression. So I think we will need to do further studies to clarify this aspect. But so far, it is possible to use these drugs also in patients that have PD-L1 negative tumors, because there still is a chance that they will benefit from the treatment. It is lower than when you have high PD-L1 expression, but it is not negative. So essentially, even if the chance is only maybe 5 to 10%, is not zero, and it is worthwhile, therefore, trying these treatments, especially after several lines of treatment have failed, and you don't have very many options at that point.
So I think this is our last question for this afternoon. Participants want to know how can they get this treatment?
As I said, there are, on the slide, there are now 3 of these PD-1 or PD-L1 antibodies that are approved by FDA. The indications are lung cancer, melanoma, bladder cancer, and head and neck cancer. So if patients have one of these tumor types, then most likely they will have the chance of receiving these treatments. And then the other distinction is about lines of treatment. So these treatments so far have been approved only for second and third line treatment, so not as first line treatment. But things are changing, as I mentioned. Probably FDA will approve one of these drugs for first line treatment in lung cancer in December. So once it's approved, then essentially, of course, if you have insurance, then you will be able to receive these treatments. And the approval will probably expand to many other tumor types. There are many other tumor types that can benefit from these treatments, such as triple-negative breast cancer, we mentioned, and many others, mesothelioma and many others. So, and hopefully thymic carcinoma also, thanks to the study that we are running.
Great, thank you. It looks like there are no further questions at this time, so I want to send thanks to all of our participants for their enthusiasm and the questions that have helped make today's webinar a success. If you would like more information, please visit the Cancer Support Community website or call our toll-free helpline. We also want to let you know about our upcoming Frankly Speaking About Lung Cancer webinars that are taking place on November 21st and 30th. For information about these or any other webinar, visit www.cancersupportcommunity.org/webinars. We would like to thank our wonderful panelists, Dr. Giaccone and Shannon Semple, for contributing their time and sharing this important information with us. And CSC would also like to thank our program supporters, Amgen, Celgene, AstraZeneca, Karyopharm, Pfizer, and Novartis. Please take a moment to complete our webinar evaluation survey, which you will be automatically redirected to. We greatly appreciate any feedback you may have. Thanks for your participation.